Welcome EasyMed Nation, Munir El Azouzi speaking here. So welcome to this new episode of the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. And today we will talk about Brexit with Richard Young, who is the technical director of Sensus Group. But before that, I still need your support. If you can subscribe to the podcast and also provide a review. If you are on iTunes, it can take 2 minutes of your time, but it will be really helping me a lot. So thank you very much. Okay, let's jump in now. Hello, EasyMed Nation. Here it's Munir El Azouzi for a new episode of the Medical Device Made Easy podcast. And today we will talk about Brexit. So I invited an insider, somebody that is living in the Brexit, somebody that is living in the UK that will be affected by the Brexit, I suppose. And I asked him what would be his advice to help us navigate through this situation. So we have on the podcast, we have Richard Young from Sensus. And Richard, how are you?
I am great, thanks, Munir. Really good to be here. Thank you for inviting us in.
You're welcome. So, Richard, I will give you the hand and just tell us more about you. Tell us more about Sensus, your company, and what exactly you are providing.
Thanks for giving us the opportunity. I'm Richard Young. I'm the technical director of Sensus Group. We're a company based in the UK, so Brexit is something we're pretty sensitive to at the moment. We're going to be hearing a lot more about that over the course of the next few minutes. And we're a company based in the UK. We've got an office in Ireland and Dublin as well, and we supply and support companies through the challenges of the medical device regulation, in vitro diagnostics regulatory changes, and now with the political changes that are happening in the UK, we're there to guide and support companies through those changes as well.
So I suppose you are a bit busy actually, no?
Just a little bit, yes.
I suppose a lot of companies are calling and asking support. So good. So Richard, let's jump in Brexit, or let's jump out. I don't know how to phrase it now. So just for people that really maybe are not aware, I suppose there is not so much, but for those that are not aware, what is exactly Brexit?
Well, Brexit is it's very difficult answering without sounding overtly political, to be perfectly honest, but I'll do my best. Okay. Brexit, back in 2016, the UK had a referendum which voted very narrowly to exit the European Union for reasons that to this day I don't entirely understand, but that's where we are politically at the moment. So the UK government is pursuing a course of action which leads to fulfilling that referendum requirement. So D-Day for that, for want of a term, when that all happens, or leaving day is set as the 29th of March of this year. So we're getting very close to it now. We're only a matter of weeks away. So theoretically, that's where we are at the moment. There've been a lot of political things going on, looking at the relationship between the EU and the UK over the last 2 and a bit years since that vote happened. To date, with no tangible outcome that can be agreed by all parties. And by all parties, I really within the UK political environment, we find very little agreement about what exiting Europe looks like. So politically a bit chaotic. No firm plan on the table at the moment. And really looking very likely at the moment, not a great scenario, but the likely scenario at the moment appears to be that the UK will exit the European Union in March without a deal in place to define the arrangements for the transfer of all sorts of goods backwards and forwards, not least of which are the things we're interested in, the life science materials, the medical devices, the in vitro diagnostics, and the pharmaceuticals that keep us all fit and healthy.
But so we are talking medical device, pharmaceutical, but it's mainly touching everything. It's not just that. So it's really broad.
Yeah, it's extremely broad. We know about CE marking, the European way within the medical devices market, but the CE mark is applied from everything from mobile phones through to consumer toys, consumer goods like toys and safety equipment, electrical equipment. It's not just medical products at all. There's a vast range of products that fall under the CE scheme. All of them are impacted by this, especially for those manufacturers who are reliant on UK-based notified bodies to grant them that CE mark. And that's when we start getting into a lot of areas where there's going to be possible issues going forwards.
Yeah, and so now we are in a situation where in 1 month, if there is 1 month approximately, if there is no deal, it will be really unknown. So it's a situation where we don't really know what will happen exactly. But I saw also that UK started to release some legislation or draft legislation. So can you talk more about that?
Yeah, the UK, at least in this industry sector, has been relatively proactive, and they've published a modification of the current UK law, which is based on the Medical Devices Directive.
Okay.
And the In Vitro Diagnostics Directive, how they were implemented in UK national law. And that's been drafted out to come into force when Brexit happens. So that this will be, the transition will be immediate. Especially if we've got a no-deal Brexit, those will go into force. And this new legislation will come to pass. Now, we've seen the draft of that. It's going to require some modification. We understand what they're trying to do at the moment, but the text of the draft legislation as it stands at the moment, for example, refers to CE marking, which is unlikely to be something that's happening in the UK. So it sort of goes a bit counterintuitive, really, isn't it?
So will we call it UK marking now, or how do we call it?
It's there's a new mark out there that there was sort of details were published on after the draft legislation was put out there, and it's called a UKCA mark, which is a UK conformity assessment mark, which obviously the designers went all out on this one, so it's the letters UK with the letters CA underneath it. Okay. It's a stunning bit of design work, if I do say so myself. Yeah, that's what looks like where we're going to be for materials coming in each of those industrial areas that we're interested in, but particularly in the medical devices and diagnostics areas. That'll be the required marking we're going to be moving to in the UK for the UK market going forward. So that's where we are from that perspective. So we do have some clarity. It is in a draft stage, but we can see what it's going to mean at the moment from coming into the UK.
So so what I read also on the UK website is the fact that they will still accept CE marked product. Is it correct?
Yeah, there's within that legislation, there's a lot of provisions for, if you're familiar with the existing regulations, you're familiar with the references to the Commission and to the Medical Device Coordination Group. If you just imagine the current regulation where we take those references out and say the word Secretary of State, you've got a pretty good idea what the legislation looks like. it's actually not too badly written. If I'm going to be critical, it is actually a little bit more succinct and to the point. And that legislation recognises CE marking. It recognises things like the CS documents within which will be published by the European Commission through the Medical Device Coordination Group as sources of information that will provide a mechanism for companies importing to the UK. And there's a transition period in there which for medical devices runs through till May 2020.
Okay.
But there's also additional provision in there that allows the Secretary of State to move timelines and transition timelines around if there's any hint of an impact on public health. So, that period of extension of accepting CE mark product or other product that has been through conformity assessment from other markets, it is a flexible thing as the draft regulations written at the moment.
Okay. But in the other side, European Union will not accept UK products as of 29th of March. Is it that?
Yeah, there's been a blanket statement from a commission saying that, and then this isn't specifically picking on the medtech field at all. Very blanket, saying that CE certification that's granted by UK-based notified bodies will cease to be valid and will be void as of midnight on the 29th of March. And anybody who wishes to reapply the CE mark to their product will be required to undergo conformity assessment again. So basically, for established manufacturers, if you haven't transitioned in a no-deal scenario, if you haven't transitioned out of UK-based notified bodies to other notified bodies by the 29th of March, you're going to be basically starting that process again with a new notified body. So, which isn't the best, but I think that's the situation we find ourselves in.
So I imagine that manufacturers, I suppose there is two types of manufacturers, some that already planned that since many months or years, because now it's since 2 years we are knowing about this Brexit, and already plan maybe to move some of their office in the European Union or in Ireland because it's based in EU then. And some others that are saying, okay, let's wait and see. Is it correct, or do you see also the same figure?
Yeah, I think as a group, manufacturers have been, UK-based manufacturers, or maybe manufacturers in general, have been looking at this approaching date, and I think the passing assumption has been that a deal would be struck before the date next month. The reality is, I think at the moment, and I'm by no means saying a deal won't be struck, but in the preceding 2 years, we haven't managed it. And there's nothing to suggest that there's any great political breakthrough that's going to make that possible within the available timeline. So I think, and certainly Sensus as a consulting group have been advising our clients for quite some time now, really from the middle of last year, to assume that a no-deal Brexit is is what you have to play for, prepare for strategically. You've got to assume the worst, and in assuming the worst, you've got to assume that and prepare for it accordingly as best you can.
Yeah,
and get as close as you can. And I think that reality is getting a lot closer now. And we've got we've got a very limited amount of time, especially for those organisations, both based in UK and around the world, who depend on UK notified bodies, of which we've got 3 major notified bodies based in the UK. who account for a significant portion of the worldwide medical devices industry, there are going to be problems. There are going to be problems.
And there is only one of them worldwide that is now accredited for MDR, and is located in UK. So it's also BSI. We have now in the Nando database, we have BSI that is accredited for the MDR. But as I said, BSI based in UK. BSI are now trying to move their headquarters to Netherlands. So there is some already, BSI, I think, already planned that since a long time. So it's why they are ahead and they are doing that. But other notified bodies haven't done that at all.
No, and this is one of the unfortunate consequences here. BSI have been pretty proactive in this area and have done a really good job. And they they currently hold certification both in the UK and in the Netherlands. And they are actively encouraging their clients to transition from their UK registration, our familiar 0086, to the new notified body designation number under the Dutch authorities. For those of anybody listening to this podcast who is a big current BSI customer, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to get that application in as quickly as possible, because you can be pretty well guaranteed that all your colleague companies are doing exactly the same thing, and it's going to be a bit of a bottleneck going forwards. But yeah, BSI has been pretty proactive, not only in doing that, but in actually successfully being registered to meet the requirements of the MDR. So yeah, it's a big blow, not only from a Brexit perspective, but from the progression of the transition period over to the MDR compliance for the industry as well. There are impacts everywhere from this.
And now, if you are luckily with BSI, I think it can be easy, or just to transfer to the Netherlands headquarters. If you are not, what is the situation actually?
If you're based with the UK notified body other than BSI, and that's where your CE mark's based at the moment, as organisations, you need to face the short-term reality as things stand at the moment.
Yeah.
And we do hope they change, but as things stand at the moment, that at the end of next month, your products will not be able to be freely moved into the European Union. They will still be able to come into the UK, but that's where as it stands at the moment, that's where it will end. Product will have to stay out of the European Union, and that's going to be a significant amount of product because of supply chains and lead times, and even if you're transitioning with an organisation like BSI, we don't even know how the Commission's going to handle a product that's being supplied into Europe that's labelled as, in BSI's case, 0086 at the moment, maybe coming from the United States or places like that.
Yeah.
So it'll be a developing area. That's, I think, is the best way of putting it. Nobody knows quite how this is going to look, what this is going to look like, and within our sector. Especially from a European perspective, I don't think anybody really fully understands what the impact on the supply of materials to the European healthcare system is going to be. If we stick with the position we've got at the moment, one can only assume that the impact on the European healthcare system will be significant.
And I suppose it will have also an impact in the economy of the UK. Maybe some companies will sink instead of swimming, like Eric Volbrecht was telling me last time. So do you think that it can also have a big impact on that?
I think it will indeed. Certainly, we see a number of companies who are UK based who are if not actually engaged in, but are at least transitioning some of their operations to European-based entities who are seeking to get EU authorized representatives based in Europe, and think at the very least beginning to get a hold of those sorts of those elements. In some cases, transferring elements or entire portions of their operations out of the UK in preparations for this and for the possible tariffs and things as free trade over that very narrow bit of waters between Europe and the UK comes under potentially WTO rules. It's compounded because we're in a situation where manufacturers, especially small to medium-sized manufacturers, were under significant compliance pressure already as we shift towards the new regulations in Europe. And this adds a whole level of complexity and possible interruption to cash flow to companies, which it can't be good for them. Let's put it that way. I'm expecting to see some companies and some products fall by the wayside as a result of this gathering of almost a perfect storm of regulatory changes and politics that's all happening at the same time.
Yeah, I want also to touch base about that. So we have the EU MDR, the EU IVDR. Now we have the Brexit, and we had also, and it's still on the way, so MDSAP change. We have the new ISO 13485 changing. So everything arrives at the same time, if I can say. So I think what's the consequence for maybe not only UK based companies, but for all companies?
I think what we're seeing as consultants who are out there and supporting industry at the moment, we're seeing a real shortage of really knowledgeable consultants or just resources out there who can support especially the quality and regulatory functions within organizations dealing in these markets. The level of requirement, professionalism and knowledge is going up astronomically to deal with these things as companies are forced to deal with more detailed technical documentation, post-market surveillance requirements, maintenance of clinical evidence, and all these topics which are driving major changes to the industry. Good changes, and they're not bad changes by any means. I think they're very good for the European consumer, and we applaud them. But as you say, we have a perfect storm where there isn't a lot of resource out there. And we estimate by talking to other colleagues in the industry across Europe that within those sort of specialty technical functions that support all these activities, we could be up to between 2,000 and 2,500 qualified and experienced individuals short in the market to really support and resource these activities. Because what we've seen is a huge drawdown on the available resource that was out there, because notified bodies are looking for these people because they need them to meet their new obligations under these requirements. Companies are looking for these resources as well, and they've been hiring. The cost of actually hiring people in this area has gone up probably 30 or 40% over the last 18 months. Very much a seller's market. Those of you who are listening to this podcast who actually have experience and qualifications, it's good news for you. There's lots of work out there, but on a resource impact basis, we've got some very, very tight timelines and not a lot of resource out there to actually deliver that. And that just is going to is already leading to the situation, even with the maintenance of existing certificates. These resource shortages are being seen in extremely long turnaround times for communications and conformity assessment activities with notified bodies across the board, whether they be in Europe and the UK. and very poor conformity assessment turnaround times, and resource issues that are impacting the delivery of existing services to customers today. It's not been helped by the fact we've lost notified bodies out of the market. They've ceased to trade. And so the service requirement is compacting into a few major notified bodies now who can offer a broad service, and they're swamped. They're absolutely swamped. They haven't got varies between organisation to organisation, but generally speaking, most of them are barely keeping their heads above water now. It's and then we add Brexit and all these other changes on top. It doesn't make the situation any better, and it would be difficult to see what notified body resource is going to support the UK CA mark going forward. So we need resources to make things happen for organisations. The cost of those resources and cost of compliance and generally is going up significantly with the required resources. So it's going to get a lot more expensive for everybody.
Yeah, and we have also one thing that is happening is that the fact that before we needed also, I mean, we still need European authorized representative, and so companies that were in the UK were also European authorized representative for other companies. And now with the UK legislation, European authorized representative that were in UK cannot be European authorized representative anymore. But the UK legislation also defined the UK representative, if I can say so. Is there a difference on that, or?
The wording is slightly different, but essentially no. Sensus have set up in Ireland to provide our Irish office supports EU authorised representative services for those companies who are losing authorised reps. And we've seen the legislation at European level and the responsibilities that fall on an authorised representative we expect to see some of the existing suppliers of those services leave the market because of the changes in circumstances required there. As far as manning and the skill set you need and the insurance and the product liability elements there. So Sensus, we've got that covered from our Irish office for anybody who needs those services. And obviously with the UK legislation, you're right, they've set up a role called the UK responsible person. But the requirements and what that responsible person has to deliver for the UK market is pretty well word for word what an EU authorised representative would have to deliver for the European market. So it's a replication of expense for a company to basically have two representatives, not least because they're going to actually have to find space on their labels to get two new marks and two new addresses onto their labeling in some cases. So that's going to be fun.
It was already a nightmare before just to put all the information on the label with all the languages, with all the logos, with all the things. Now it will be adding more will be also a nightmare for all the marketing departments that are creating those packaging. So it's something to think about.
I think marketing may have to leave getting involved in the packaging and accept that their logos are going to get a lot smaller in the future. And there's I think there's going to have to be some very creative design of labels, but especially both the new regulations in the UK and Europe require UDI to be incorporated into that labeling, and barcodes take up a lot of space. They're going to be readable. So we've got a lot of challenges. Those small bits of paper that come with our products are going to be very, very busy. Or companies are going to have to think very strategically about how they're going to do labeling going forwards, and there might be some tough decisions made by some organisations there. Based on the South and so on.
So now, if you were a UK manufacturer today and you have done nothing, so what would you do?
I think in the immediately, I'd be looking to make existing stocks of materials that have been released under legitimate CE mark product available to the European market. And I'd probably be going as far as considering moves like setting up temporary distribution warehouses in the European Union and moving my product as far as is able over there, so it's available to that supply chain, to try and minimize the disruption around this date at the end of March.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I think your short to medium term things you have to be doing, you need to be looking at the MDR compliance and looking strategically to your arrangements for importers and distributors in the European Union, and setting, if you haven't got them already, setting up that contractual relationship with those suppliers of services in the European Union. And if you're unlucky enough to be with a UK-based notified body, whether you're UK-based or not, I would be, as a matter of priority, number one priority, I would be transitioning. I would be in the process, if not already, in the process of transitioning to an EU-based notified body, keeping in mind.
Take to do that?
Sorry?
How long does it take to do that, to do this move usually?
It's very difficult to say. It depends on the complexity of your product, the risk classification of your product, and the notified body you're dealing with. The only advice I can give to listeners is, if you're going to do that, make sure that you're going for somebody who has a program in place to be, they're still going to be there under the medical devices regulations going forwards. So they're going to be able to continue that support. And that's not universal across the European-based notified bodies. We know of several who've indicated that they're not going to continue providing services at the end of the transition period from the Medical Devices Directive. You need to take that into account. Again, you will be one company in a queue with a lot of other people who are suffering exactly the same way. It's cold comfort, but it's the same for everybody, I'm afraid. Those manufacturers who have an existing relationship with European notified bodies, you're okay. Stick with that. It's good. And then I think once you've got those sorted out, then sort your labeling out once you know who you're working with.
Okay. So one last point is, do you think there will be a kind of a happy end at the end of all this?
It's very difficult to see based on the statements that come out from the political side of things from the Commission, or others, to see where the happy end is at the end of all of this. The bottom line analysis here has to be that the delivery in healthcare, whether it be in the EU or in the UK, is reliant on a diverse range of suppliers and resources that are spread over many countries, whether it be the UK or USA or whatever it is. And we have developed since the early 90s a very close group community of understanding, support, and so on, to deliver these safe devices and have the expertise available. It would be very short-sighted for any government body to rip that up and expect it to be replaced instantly. It's not reasonable. There are going to be a lot of problems here, and I think the responsible line from any governmental organisation is to take steps to minimise the impacts of these changes on patients and patient healthcare delivery. I think we've got to, we've got to hope our political side are capable of doing that. Frankly, I don't care what they do with toys. I really, really don't. But they've got to get healthcare provision right, and one would hope that that's going to come to the fore over the next few weeks at the very least. But we've got to play the facts we have in front of us today. So those facts in the short term are quite bleak. It does indicate significant disruption to supply and compliance across most companies in one way or another, however you're dealing. I don't doubt that it will settle down. at the end of this period. But I think if you take the MDR and Brexit together as the new regulatory environment, I think manufacturers and healthcare providers, the NHS in England or healthcare providers in all countries, are going to have to recognise that the cost of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics is going to increase significantly.
Yeah.
So that the cost of health provision, because the additional resources that are going to have to be brought in, not only to make the transition but to maintain it in anything like a professional manner, is not going to be insignificant. So it's going to be a very interesting few years. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
but I'm sure we'll get through to the end.
Yeah, I imagine also, yeah, it will not be just something that will happen within the next few months. It's really a 5 years period where we have all this to go together and to work together. But what during this period can Sensus do? So your company, what is exactly the service that you can offer to help people out there that are looking for some light, if I can say, out of the tunnel? So what can you do?
Well, as we've said already, we touched on two of the principal areas we work in. The first is we provide these authorized responsible person services in the UK and the EU authorized rep services from our office in Dublin. That helps companies have a reliable source of continued service as we transition through these things. But that's a fairly simple and straightforward thing to do. What we're really trying to do is provide services, consulting services to support industry going through those, to work with companies and notified bodies to get the best and most efficient outcome from this. And really our ethos is based around this realization that there aren't that many qualified people out there who really know what they're doing. They're out there, but within any given day, we only have so much we can do in any given day.
Yeah.
There are capacity issues, and so what Sensus are dedicated to doing is providing a consulting service, but really a two-tier consulting service. So we can take experienced consultants and supplement them with consultants we train in-house to make that resource go further and more cost effective, if you see what I mean. So what we're trying to do is stretch that resource as far as it goes by giving it a support mechanism. So we have a broad range of consultants on medical devices and in vitro diagnostics who can very knowledgeably not only support companies but support less qualified consultants who can get in there and look at things like supply chain that needs to be really, really worked on to meet these MDR requirements and so on. It can be reviewing labels and contracts and things like that to make these things really work. So we have this consultant provision, and we have a training provision which we use to train our own in-house staff, and we make available through training directly to our customers. We have a CPD accredited series of week-long courses which are accredited by exam. So we try and bring people up to the best standard we can as quickly as possible. We're very, very aware that there is no real undergraduate professional qualification for this sort of technical discipline that we're talking about that's really successfully turning out undergraduates who are ready for the marketplace in Europe. And we're trying to fill that gap as best we can. So that's what we're doing. So we have our services in representative services, in training, and in the provision of consulting services sort of bolted on the side of that. So consulting services to our authorized rep clients, to people in general, for both the transition to Brexit compliance and for the MDR and IVDR compliance as well. So that's what we try to do. And we work with awful lot of organizations to try and make those happen.
No, it's great. The important thing here is to say that Sensus Group. So you have you are, as I've said at the beginning, you are an insider from UK. So you already know what's happening there. You are following what's going on. You have the contact person and contact companies. So for people that are dealing with this situation, you are the person that can help them and can navigate them through all this. I suppose there is also, as you mentioned, a lot of companies that are outside of Europe that are also having their notified body in UK or authorized representative maybe in UK. So it's also a situation maybe that they are not familiar with. So having somebody that maybe they can also help them to navigate through that is also a good solution. So
yeah, it is a minefield, and we the consulting message comes out for free, and the message is very clear to anybody responsible for the strategic direction of their company in this area. You need to engage with this process now and recognize the potential impacts of these changes, and there is inevitable impact in the short term for those companies who are maybe a bit further behind in implementing solutions, and you're going to have to accept that and plan as an organization for it. But we're there to help move things forward as best we can. But as we've said, with these transitions and systems are extremely reliant on the resources not only we can provide, but in notified bodies and commission at all levels of the industry, both within companies and so on. And we recognise that there are limitations to how much the system can take from a capacity perspective, and we feel that we do our best to make that move forward with our contacts, as you say, and our knowledge of the industry, by making things as good as we can to move things forward with the least amount of disruption. But disruption now, as we've been discussing, is pretty well inevitable. So we need to minimize that now.
Okay, so if people want to follow you or to contact you, how they should do?
Right. Well, the best way of getting hold of us is from our website. We're www.sensus-group.com, and we've on those side we've got pages about the various services we offer, including our training courses and our consulting services. We're always looking for other people who are out there and freelance consultants who are available to go onto our books as well. So we're always trying to get good consultants that we can bring in who can add value to the companies we contact with, as well as companies who need some help. So we're here to provide all that. Go to our website, look at what we've got there. You can find my details on LinkedIn to see sort of my own background and experience. And that'll give you a good link into the company as well. And we post regularly through LinkedIn, usually as our way of communicating with the professional world. But it's interesting times, Munir. Interesting and challenging times.
I will put anyway all your details on the show notes of this episode, so people can directly go there and check, contact you directly on LinkedIn or through the website of the company. So great. So something else to say?
No, I think that pretty well covers it, as you say.
Yeah.
Anybody who's got concerns in this area, we encourage you to contact us. But it's good that this is going out and people can get a bit of a background of what's going on there and take some action. It doesn't necessarily have to be Sensus, but you need to be doing something.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you, Richard. So thank you for all this explanation. I hope people have more clarity now on what they have to do. And if you have any question or anything, you can contact directly Richard or go through the website, so sensus-group.com to have more information about some support that they can provide you. Okay, so Richard, thank you very much. And then I wish you a nice day.
My pleasure, Munir. Pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you. Thank you, Richard, for this optimistic review of the Brexit. I hope this helped people really to define what are the next steps for them. So thank you, and don't hesitate to go to the show notes to get all the links and the details regarding Richard Young and regarding Sensus Group. Okay, so this is the end of this podcast. Thank you for listening to it or watching to it on YouTube. If you are on YouTube, don't forget to subscribe so you can see all the new videos. And if you are listening that from a platform, so don't forget also to subscribe so that you can also be informed of the next episode. And don't forget, keep learning and also share this episode or share this podcast with your colleagues who want to learn more about medical device regulations and standards. Thank you and have a good day. Bye.